welcome back to the show. Today, we're diving into the world of cults.
I know, they're fascinating, right?
Yeah, they're definitely fascinating, but also pretty scary.
Yeah, a little bit. And to really get them, really get why they exist and how they work, we've got to go beyond those, like, Hollywood stereotypes.
Exactly. We need to understand the real psychology behind them.
So, to help us with that, we've got this really great article. It's called What is a Cult? Characteristics and the Bite Model Explained.
Oh, that's a good one. I've read that one before.
It's awesome, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to use that as our guide today to kind of equip ourselves with the knowledge to, like, spot cult-like behavior and understand its impact.
Yeah, and that's important because the word cult gets thrown around a lot, sometimes unfairly, I think.
Oh, totally.
So it's important to have a clear definition so we can separate real concerns from just plain fear of the unknown.
Okay, so let's start there. What is a cult, according to this article? Well, it's not just about having unusual beliefs. There are plenty of groups with out there ideas that aren't harmful.
Right, right.
A cult, according to the article, is a group with unusual beliefs that are usually centered around a very charismatic leader.
Okay, so a strong leader figure.
And that leader demands, like, total loyalty. But the real key here is the control they exert over their members' lives. That's when it becomes dangerous.
Control. So it's not just about weird rituals or strange ideas. It's about power, right? How that power structure is used to manipulate people.
Precisely. And to help us identify that manipulation, the article lists 5 major red flags to watch for in a group or organization.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with those red flags.
All right, so first we have that charismatic leadership we were just talking about.
Got it. Makes sense.
Then there's the presence of unusual beliefs, often presented as the truth, the only way to salvation or enlightenment.
Okay, so a very exclusive truth, like we have it and no one else does.
Exactly. Next, and this is huge, is control and isolation. These groups, they try to limit your contact with the outside world, with your family and friends who might challenge their views.
Oh, wow.
They want to be your sole source of information and support.
So they're like building their own little reality bubble, cutting you off from everything else.
Exactly. And within that bubble, exploitation is rampant, often financial, but also emotional and even sexual.
That's just awful.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have charismatic leadership, unusual beliefs, control and isolation and exploitation. What's the 5th red flag?
The 5th one is high commitment.
High commitment.
And it's sneaky because it's disguised as, devotion or dedication to a higher cause. They demand more and more of your time, your energy, your resources. Think of a time when you might have felt pressured to give more and more to something, even when it started impacting your work, your relationships, your life.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. It's like a slow tightening of the grip, making it harder and harder to break free.
Exactly. And it often flies under the radar because it's presented as something positive, something noble.
So we've got these 5 red flags. They paint a pretty disturbing picture. But how do cults actually achieve this level of control? What are the mechanisms they use?
That's where the BITE model comes in. It gets really interesting here.
Okay, hit me with the BITE model.
So BITE stands for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control.
Okay, BITE.
Got it. It's a framework developed by this guy, Stephen Hassan, a former cult member himself.
Yeah.
He dedicated his life to understanding and exposing these tactics.
A former cult member. Wow, that definitely gives him some credibility, huh? Okay, break down this BITE model for me. How does it work?
So let's start with behavior control. Cults impose strict rules and regulations on every aspect of their members' lives, dictating what they eat, how they dress, when they sleep, even their relationships.
Wow, it sounds intense. But I guess if you control someone's basic behaviors, their actions, then you can start to control their thoughts and feelings too, right?
You got it. And that leads us right into information control. They tightly restrict access to outside information, to any perspectives that differ from theirs. Think of North Korea, for example. You know how restricted information is there. It's not just censorship. It's about controlling the narrative, making alternative viewpoints literally unimaginable.
It's like they build this echo chamber where only the cult's voice is heard. Chilling.
Building on behavior control and information control, you get thought control. They replace critical thinking with their own doctrines through, indoctrination, repetition, loaded language. Dissent becomes dangerous, unthinkable.
So it's not just about limiting information from the outside. It's about shaping how you think about the world.
Right. And that thought control is reinforced through emotional control. They manipulate feelings, using guilt, shame, and fear to make you dependent on the group for validation and support.
It's like a step-by-step playbook for mind control. Really heavy stuff.
The insidious thing about it is that it creates a feedback loop. Behavior control limits information, which leads to thought control, which reinforces emotional dependency on the group. Breaking free becomes incredibly difficult.
It's a vicious cycle of control, and it's all happening under the surface. Not some obvious evil villain thing, but much more subtle and insidious.
It's about slowly eroding your sense of self and replacing it with the cult's ideology.
Which leads us to some real world examples, right?
Yeah.
Because as fascinating as all this theory is, it really hits home when you see it in action.
Absolutely. The article mentions a few infamous cults. We've got the People's Temple, Heaven's Gate, the Manson family, and XIVM.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are some big names. Each one had devastating consequences.
Absolutely. Let's start with the People's Temple, the Jonestown tragedy.
Yeah, that one is still just chilling. Over 900 people died after drinking poison Flavorade in a mass suicide orchestrated by their leader, Jim Jones.
It's a truly tragic example of how a charismatic leader can lead followers down such a destructive path.
Speaking of control over appearance, Heaven's Gate is another chilling example.
Right. What's striking about Heaven's Gate is their intense control over their members' appearances. Those matching outfits, the shaved heads. They believed they needed to shed their earthly identities to prepare for their ascension onto a spaceship.
It's like they were trying to, I don't know, erase their humanity, become something otherworldly.
Yeah, it's interesting, they saw their physical bodies as just containers, temporary vehicles that needed to be discarded.
So who was the mastermind behind all this? Who convinced all those people to give up everything, even their lives?
It was Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They met, get this, in a psychiatric hospital in the 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how did they end up, leading a cult?
They believed they were chosen messengers, like the two witnesses prophesied in the Book of Revelation.
So they were tapping into existing religious narratives, but creating their own kind of twisted version of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They blended bits of Christianity, New Age spirituality, UFO mythology. It was a powerful narrative that attracted a really diverse group of people, artists, musicians, even tech professionals.
It wasn't just the stereotypical vulnerable or gullible person. These were successful people too, right?
Yeah, a lot of them were highly educated, successful in their fields, but they felt this emptiness, a disillusionment with mainstream society.
So they were seeking something more, something beyond the everyday.
Yeah, yearning for a deeper connection, a sense of belonging, transcendence, and Heaven's Gate offered them that, although in a very tragically distorted way.
Did they use the bite model?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Heaven's Gate is a classic example of the bite model in action. Tight control over behavior, dictating everything from diet to sleep schedules.
Right. I remember they discouraged romantic relationships and any physical intimacy.
Right. They believed those earthly attachments hindered their spiritual progress. They also controlled information. Limiting contact with the outside world, filtering all information through their own twisted lens.
Creating their own reality bubble where their beliefs were the only truth.
Exactly. And within that bubble, thought control flourished. They bombarded followers with their unique interpretations of scripture and UFO lore, really hammering it in through repetition and indoctrination.
So literally controlling how their members thought, shaping their perceptions.
And reinforcing that with emotional manipulation. They instilled fear of the outside world, portraying it as corrupt and evil, offering themselves as the only path to salvation, the only escape from the coming doom.
It's heartbreaking to think about how much trust and devotion they had in Applewhite and Nettles.
It's a stark reminder of the power of charisma and the very human need for connection and belonging.
So how did it all end? I mean, we know the tragic outcome, the mass suicide, but what were the events leading up to it?
In the months leading up to it, Applewhite became increasingly convinced that this comet, Hale-Bopp, was a sign, a celestial vehicle sent to transport them to this next level. He said their earthly bodies were just vessels to be discarded in order to board the spaceship.
It's like a science fiction movie gone wrong.
Yeah, a chilling example of how belief can warp reality.
So they believed they were literally leaving their bodies behind, joining a spaceship.
Yeah, they planned their deaths very meticulously, consuming a lethal cocktail of phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and vodka. They thought this would help them transition.
It's fascinating and deeply, deeply disturbing.
It is.
What are the kind of key takeaways from this case?
I think the Heaven's Gate case shows us the devastating consequences of cult control and the power of belief to shape reality. It underscores the importance of critical thinking, being wary of groups that demand total loyalty and isolate members.
Yeah, it's a reminder that cults can exist anywhere, even among seemingly intelligent and successful people.
Exactly. It's not about intelligence. It's about vulnerability and the human need for belonging and purpose.
So, what can we learn from Heaven's Gate? How can we protect ourselves and those we love from falling prey to this kind of manipulation?
Awareness is key. Understanding the tactics they use so we can identify those red flags, question anyone claiming to have all the answers.
It's about being skeptical, thinking critically, seeking different perspectives.
Yeah. Encourage healthy skepticism and open dialogue in our own lives and in society as a whole.
This has been a really eye-opening discussion. We've defined what a cult is, we've looked at the chilling bite model, and we've examined this tragic case of Heaven's Gate.
We've seen how charismatic leaders can manipulate people, leading them down a really destructive path.
But there's a bit of hope here.
Yeah, there is.
By understanding these dynamics, we can empower ourselves to make more informed decisions, protect ourselves from undue influence.
I agree.
So what's next in our deep dive?
In our last segment, we'll shift gears a bit. We're going to explore that cult versus new religious movement debate.
Oh, yeah, that should be interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk about the ethical considerations of how we label these groups.
That's a great topic. So stay tuned, folks, for that final part of our deep dive into cults.
Welcome back to our deep dive.
Yeah, we're back and ready to get into some real-world examples of cults.
Yeah, we talked about the definition, those 5 red flags, that really kind of chilling bite model, breaking down those manipulation tactics.
It's a lot to absorb, you know. But now we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty, look at how all of that plays out in a specific example.
Exactly. And the example we're going to focus on today is Heaven's Gate.
Oh yeah, Heaven's Gate, definitely a case that's stuck with me over the years, that mass suicide back in '97. It's hard to forget those images.
It is. It is. And, while it might be easy to just dismiss them as, I don't know, simply delusional, their story really offers a disturbing glimpse into the power of belief and the allure of a charismatic leader.
It's true. I remember those photos, the matching outfits, the shaved heads, this eerie calmness on their faces. It was so surreal.
And that uniformity, the strict control over their appearance, that wasn't just like a random thing. It was a key part of their whole belief system.
So they thought they had to, abandon their individual identities to become like these pure vessels or something?
Yeah, they believed they needed to do that to prepare for this extraterrestrial journey, this ascension to a higher level of being.
It's like they were trying to erase their humanity.
Yeah, I see what you mean. They saw their physical bodies as like containers, temporary vehicles that needed to be discarded to reach that higher plane.
It's a pretty bleak worldview when you think about it.
It is.
So who is the mastermind? Who's the person that, convinced all those people to give up everything, including their lives?
The leaders were Marshall Applewhite and Bonnie Nettles. They actually met in a psychiatric hospital back in the early 70s.
Oh, wow. In a psychiatric hospital.
Yeah. And get this, they believed they were, like the 2 witnesses mentioned in the book of Revelation, chosen messengers.
So they were building on existing religious narratives, but twisting them to fit their own agenda?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
They took bits and pieces from Christianity, New Age spirituality, even UFO mythology to create this really compelling story that resonated with people who were searching for meaning, searching for purpose.
And who were those people? What kind of individuals were drawn to Heaven's Gate?
They actually attracted a pretty diverse group. I mean, there were artists, musicians, even some tech professionals.
So not just the stereotypical, lost souls or whatever.
No, not at all. Many of them were actually very successful in their fields, highly educated, but they felt this kind of emptiness, this disillusionment with mainstream society, I guess you could say.
So they were looking for something more, something deeper.
Exactly. They yearned for connection, a sense of belonging, a way to transcend the ordinary, and Heaven's Gate offered them that. Tragically, it was all a very twisted, distorted version of those things.
So going back to the bite model, how did they use those manipulation tactics?
Oh, Heaven's Gate. It's like a textbook case of the bite model in action. They had incredibly tight control over their members' behavior. Everything from what they ate to their sleep schedules, everything was dictated.
Right. And wasn't there also that rule about no romantic relationships or physical intimacy?
Yeah, absolutely. They believed any kind of earthly attachment was going to hinder their spiritual progress. And that control extended to information as well. They actively discouraged any contact with the outside world, filtering any and all information through their own lens.
So, like building that reality bubble we talked about earlier, making their beliefs the only truth.
Exactly. And within that bubble, thought control just flourished. They would constantly bombard their members with these very specific interpretations of scripture, UFO lore, just really drilling it in through repetition and indoctrination.
So they were shaping how their members thought, shaping their perception of reality.
Right. And of course, they also used emotional manipulation. They'd instill fear of the outside world. They'd portray it as this corrupt, evil place. And they'd offer themselves, apple white and nettles as the only path to salvation, the only way to escape the impending doom.
So it's both fascinating and terrifying, this level of control, and makes you realize just how powerful a charismatic leader can be.
It does.
So how did it all end? I mean, obviously we know the tragic outcome, the mass suicide, but what were the specific events leading up to it?
So in the months leading up to the suicide, Applewhite, he became increasingly fixated on this comet, Hale-Bopp. He was convinced it was a sign, like a celestial vehicle coming to transport them to what they called the next level.
So this comet was like their ticket out, their escape from this corrupted world.
Exactly. And he kept preaching that their earthly bodies, they were just vessels that needed to be discarded, to board this celestial spaceship.
It's like something out of a science fiction movie, but with this really dark twist.
Yeah, a tragic example of how beliefs can warp reality, how a charismatic leader can convince people to do things that seem unthinkable.
So they actually believed they were literally going to leave their bodies behind and join the spaceship.
Yeah, and they planned it meticulously. They even they consumed this lethal cocktail of phenobarbital mixed with applesauce and vodka. They thought it would help them transition.
It's chilling. What are like the key takeaways from this case? What can we learn from this tragedy?
Well, I think the Heaven's Gate case really highlights the devastating consequences of cult control and how powerful belief can be in shaping our reality. It shows us just how important critical thinking is, how crucial it is to be wary of groups that demand total loyalty and isolate their members from the outside world.
It's a reminder that this can happen anywhere, to anyone. These weren't unintelligent people.
Right. It's not about intelligence. It's about vulnerability, the human need to belong, to find purpose. Those are things we all share.
So what can we do? How can we protect ourselves, protect those we love from falling prey to this kind of manipulation?
I think awareness is key. Understanding the tactics that cults use, recognizing those red flags, and questioning anyone who claims to have all the answers.
So being skeptical, thinking critically, and seeking out different perspectives.
Exactly. Encourage healthy skepticism and open dialogue,
Yeah.
in our personal lives and just in society as a whole.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the world of cults today.
Yeah, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? A lot to unpack.
Definitely. I think for me, what's really resonating is this idea that anyone can be vulnerable to this kind of manipulation.
Yeah.
It's not about intelligence or education. It's about human needs and vulnerabilities that we all share, right?
Absolutely. That's something the article really brings home. Cults, they prey on those universal human desires, the need for belonging, purpose, meaning. We all want those things.
Yeah, we do. And when we're feeling lost or uncertain, especially, I think it's easy to see how those needs can make us more susceptible to manipulation.
Definitely. And that's why I think this next point the article brings up is so important. This whole debate about cult versus new religious movement.
Oh, right. Yeah. I was just thinking about that. The line can be so blurry. Where do you even start to draw the distinction?
It's a complex issue for sure, and
Yeah.
there's no easy answer. I know some people argue that the term cult itself is it's too loaded.
Yeah, it's got that negative connotation.
Exactly. It could be used to kind of dismiss or demonize
Yeah.
groups that don't fit mainstream norms.
Yeah. Like it's become this weaponized word. So some people prefer that term new religious movement.
Right, which sounds more neutral, less judgmental.
Right. But then isn't there a danger in being too afraid to call out actually harmful practices just to avoid offending someone or a group?
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin, for sure. I mean, we need to be sensitive to the diversity of beliefs, but also acknowledge that some groups can be dangerous.
So how do we find that balance? How can we be critical but not dismissive, discerning without being judgmental? It's a tough one.
I think it really comes down to those red flags we discussed and the bite model. If a group exhibits those characteristics, the control, isolation, exploitation, that's a huge red flag no matter what label we use.
Right. The name isn't as important as the actual behavior, right?
Yeah.
And the potential for harm.
Exactly. We need to look past the rhetoric and focus on the dynamics, the power and control dynamics.
Yeah. That makes sense. So we, as, critical thinkers, we have to ask ourselves those tough questions. Is this group encouraging independent thought or demanding obedience?
Okay,
Are they
yeah.
building healthy relationships or isolating people from their loved ones? Are they empowering people or exploiting them?
All good questions to keep in mind.
Right. Yeah. And I think, maybe the bite model can actually help us have those conversations. It gives us that framework for assessing the potential harm in a way that's, I think, both critical and compassionate.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
It's like a toolkit almost for navigating this complex landscape of belief and belonging,
Yeah.
helping us see those subtle signs of manipulation, protect ourselves and the people we care about.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that questioning critical thinking, that's not like a sign of disrespect or disloyalty. It's essential for protecting ourselves, our autonomy.
Yeah, well said. Well, as we come to the end of this deep dive, I've got to say it's been pretty intense, kind of scary at times.
It has.
But I also feel, I don't know, cautiously optimistic maybe. I mean, cults are real and their tactics can be incredibly damaging. But we're not powerless.
We're not.
We've got knowledge, we have tools to protect ourselves.
And the more we understand about how manipulation works, the more we can resist it, right?
Mhm.
Make informed choices about who and what we trust.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we learn about these things, the better prepared we are to face them. So to all our listeners out there, stay curious, stay skeptical.
Keep asking those questions.
Exactly. And keep diving deep. And remember, the best defense against manipulation, it's a well-informed and critically thinking mind. Until next time, happy diving.